The village further down the path had many similarities with the one you used to live next to after meeting Avery. It was a relatively small town for some place this important, inhabited by around 2,000 people, yet it had almost everything that could be needed to sustain itself. The coast wasn't too far away, and he was informed by his companion that there was a small dock for trade, which he remembered from his walk. Fields of grain, cabbage and corn, but strawberries as well, plastered the rich ground on the right, while more mild hills were surrounding the village from every other side. The village itself didn't have a proper marketplace like the one near the castle. The streets consisted of dirt which had been trampled down by dozens and dozens of generations and formed an uneven ground to walk on. Practically every building further on the outside focused on livestock or were used as barns because of their easy accessibility from the fields. While walking through what seemed to be the main street, because of how wide it was, you saw several children running around, playing, and there was no adult in sight. But not for long. A woman carrying a spatula came around the corner, and the children immediately came inside while she was shouting something about safety. The two visitors reached the area where things were actually being sold. Left and right were houses whose lower part was partially opened. You could hear the noise of metal hitting metal before seeing the blacksmith in one of the open buildings hammering a glowing object into the right shape. Then there was a bored baker with a burning stick in his mouth standing outside of his shop because the time of selling much was over and there weren't many potential buyers in the first place. Avery hinted at the glowing stick and said, "Aaron told me this place has the second highest knockout drug production in the kingdom. The root barely grows anywhere else, so it's a very well-visited spot during the growth time in autumn." "Why do they even grow them in the first place?" Dew wanted to know while staring down the baker, who apparently took it personally and threw the drug into the puddle and acted as if it never happened. "It sells well and at a high price. The interest rate is quite high compared to many other goods. A unit mate complained about the pricing. A small bag cost him a month's worth of saving." "And what does he use it for?" The implication was clear to Avery, but she defended him. "Sleep issues. Mostly because he had anxiety. They occurred regularly, and a small dose helped him calm down without making him addicted to the stuff. Actually, he gave the drug to Sue for her to control his consumption because she kept on pestering for precise measurements of it. But whatever. Everyone just dies somehow." It was strange but understandable that the woman had a sort of big sister role in her environment. The houses were far from pretty or cozy with their simple roofs plastered with sticks or hay. Most of them were only 2 stories tall, with an attic which had an opening comparable to a door underneath a metal hook towards the street. Dew assumed its purpose to be easy lifting of objects towards the storage level, but with a little bit of fantasy it appeared more like another kind of inbuilt execution device. Avery noted how empty the streets were. People were still hurrying by with a basket in their hands or pushing a wheelbarrow from one side to the other, yet they didn't have the courtesy of stopping by places for long to have a chat with familiar faces. The word exchanges you could hear were short and straightforward. Maybe it was just the way things were handled in this region. From time to time he noticed curious glances from every side. They weren't directed towards him like they were near the castle. Here he didn't look much like an outsider with his light skin, and the scars could be easily overseen from a few meters distance. He watched the farmer's facial expression shift from mistrust to a strange kind of relief as he looked down at the hybrid newcomer. Dew locked eyes with the farmer, and his expression changed to that of dread. Did the blond new guy really look that imposing? Not at all, but what else was the reason for that kind of fear? Do the after effects of the root imply anxiety? Dew speculated. She looked around to the man he had just sent into a daze. Withdrawal does, but it's mostly paired with aggression, shaking, and a poor physical condition. Those are the most common symptoms according to Sue. That reminds me of a story of a case Patrick had to deal with about a week ago. Dew considered if the castle also got its supplies from this place. The chances were high because of the regular contact there was between the manor and the castle, so delivery costs could be saved. Then he considered whether he should burn down the fields, if those hell roots even grew in fields. The story Avery began to recall was about a local hospital tending to everyone's needs without hesitation, as long as they had enough to pay, of course. The head doctor had a daughter who he forced to work as a nurse. Patrick assumed she got sick of it and wanted to do something which would make her father fire her. Unfortunately for her, she decided to grab the bottle of expensive concentrated root sedatives and chug it completely. She was found dead on the floor, covered in the liquid she couldn't swallow. What a stupid way to go out. They stopped by one of the few shops who didn't have any specific kind of items to sell. There was a woman leaning dreamily onto the table of goods she had put up before her entrance. She wore several shawls, even though the sun was shining, and her gaze was flying through the air. The reddish eyes immediately made it obvious. She was in another universe. The bitter smell surrounding her confirmed his suspicion. The eerie woman didn't scare his companion off from browsing the offer. There were all kinds of things ranging from day-to-day tools to cheap jewelry to little statues of various forms used to present Bota to put on various shrines. The shop didn't fit into the place. It was like a pheasant trying to become one with a group of delivery pigeons. Maybe some condition kept her from pursuing average jobs. Avery was picking up one end of a rope when a scrawny hand seized her by the leather stripe running across her chest to hold the belt and the claymore and pulled her towards the woman's face, who suddenly had straightened her position and was now staring deeply into the knight's eyes. Avery looked a little unsure after the sudden attack, and the woman still hadn't spoken a word. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked carefully and tried to remove the hand from her chest, but it didn't loosen up so easily. Then the woman sank back and finally relaxed. Doo heard her mutter to herself, "No, no, no, not the same eyes, not the same face, no, no, no." Doo and Avery looked at each other, both speechless. A moment passed, and she picked up the rope again and held it before the woman's sickly eyes to ask, "How much for this?" Even though she was clearly seeing the object, she didn't react. Avery sighed. A man stopped by. "Are you a knight?" he asked. The knight nodded. "Are you here for the two rascals?" She shook her head. "I'm here outside of duty." "And of course you don't know. Evie here saw those criminals beat poor Sebastian there into death half a week ago. The hag has been completely out of it since then. Doesn't talk, doesn't eat. Heck, maybe she doesn't even sleep, 'cause she's been on the routes for years. Just throw her 2 coins or so and take what you want. It's what we've all been doing," the man told her. "So what exactly happened to the citizens that perished? A robbery, perhaps?" The man responded with laughter and pointed down the street where Doo could see a surprisingly pretty house with an outside as white as chalk, beautiful black wood framing the entrance windows and walls, and 3 stories tall without the attic. Then he recalled, "You see that house over there? That's where they used to live. Pretty fancy, eh? So there were those 2 strangers coming to town out of nowhere, covered in hoods and everything but one of them, a tall one. She was definitely a shapeshifter. We could see it in her vibrant eyes, a little like yours but more of a yellow color. Turned out the dude was one of those filthy rebels that stick their nose into everyone's business to ruin them forever. One night we could hear screams from across the street, and then Aaron crashed through the window, and then young Sebastian. Maid told us those bastards had snuck in and attacked them in their sleep. Can you believe it?" "Why them? Rebels only target people going against their views, right?" Doo thought out loud. The man shrugged, and immediately it was clear he was getting uncomfortable at the topic. "You know, just helping families meet each other, nothing big at all." They sold hybrids, or were connected to the market in some way. Doo had heard several stories of the incidents where exactly those types of workers were persecuted by unnamed rebels. Technically, the trade market was against the law, so nobody but the extremists bothered to act against those self-righteous killings. Quickly they were alone with the woman once again, who was still in the same position, but had her eyes on the house. Doo now held 2 papers with the headline, "Wanted, Dead or Alive." Beneath were hand-drawn portraits of 2 different people. The first depicted a cat hybrid with short, messy hair and a terrifying expression. For the second person, the artist couldn't decide whether to draw her with long or short ears and with or without wings. The pricing for either of them was high, especially for the shapeshifter. Avery stretched out her hand, and Avery gave her the posters. She glanced over them, crumpled it up, and muttered, "What a shame, the drawings are quite nice." Then the paper lit up in flames, and the ashes fell to the ground. "That would be poster 34 and 35 for me." "You made a game out of burning criminal posters?" "Technically they aren't legal, so we're not doing anything illegal here, and I have to catch up with John. He's got 49 already," she replied smugly. Then she followed the man's suggestion, placed some coins in front of the table, probably more than enough, and took the rope. You didn't expect her to go through with the offer, so he asked, while they began to walk back, "And what do you need that for?" "I'd say personal use. Practice knots, secure baggage, tying my wings together next time I jump off a cliff, things like that." She stumbled a little to the side as Dew pushed her. She laughed. He didn't. "What? It was a joke!" Avery exclaimed, regaining her balance. His pace quickened, leaving her behind a few steps. He heard her steps on the dirt ground catching up, then her warm hand on his shoulders. "Listen, I didn't mean it." "Oh, no, don't get me wrong," he loudly began rambling. "It was a fantastic joke. Next time buy a calendar with an X on it, put it up on our wall and tell me, 'There, I keep track of important events like celebration days, birthdays, and the day I'll kill myself.' Wouldn't that be great? Maybe you can even put my next execution date next to it." I didn't mean to." He stood still, moved his hand above hers, and dragged her before him. "How am I supposed to believe you?" She looked down towards him, but Dew turned his head further away. Maybe then she wouldn't notice how frustrated he actually was. Then he continued, "At first I thought your job might get you killed. Turns out the biggest danger to you is yourself, and I don't know how to keep my promise of keeping you alive. Am I supposed to tie you down or what?" They stood on the path shortly outside the town. Dew still had her hand cupped between his, even though he didn't understand why. He genuinely didn't understand why he had figured it to be necessary to call anything out. It was a joke, even if it wasn't one to laugh about. Now she would probably feel bad about the joke and everything it implied. Avery had made a promise on her side, too. She had promised to stay alive, and promises were dear to her. He let go, and her arm slumped downwards. His feet carried him onwards while she was still standing in silence. For a moment he stood still, turned back to her and said, "Whatever, let's just go back." As if that would make up for anything. The fields passed by, the forest began, and then he could see the edge of the cliff on the side again. The clouds had returned and blocked the sun, which drenched everything in a grey light, reflecting his mood perfectly. Next to the chapel his steps slowed down, which was the moment he felt her arms wrap around him from behind him. He didn't know what to say, how to react, or even how to move. Maybe that's how she repeated her promise. She wouldn't be hurt. Not now and not later, and he let her comfort him even though she was the one who really needed it.